Using the power of the internet, you can now watch GLC on any TV in the US, Canada, the UK, and Ireland with Roku. Basically, a box that connects to your television. Roku acts as a middleman between your internet connection and your television. So if you have internet service at your home, chances are high that you can watch all of the great GLC programming. And best of all, it's highly affordable too, with only a one-time fee ranging from $50 to $100. Log on to our website, www.glc.us.com, for details on how you can watch GLC via Roku.
Well, welcome to Update News. As you can clearly see, Rick Wadge and I are here without Mom and Dad again. As we told you on Monday, Mother had surgery last week, so she's not going to be here for a few weeks.
But she's doing great.
She is doing great.
Yeah. Recovering fast, but she still needs time.
That's right. That's what happens when you have surgery.
Exactly.
It's like a rule. It's a surgery rule. But in the meantime, we do have a lot of things going on, and lots of news.
Lots of news.
I think the first thing we'll do today is take a look at Lars Enarsson's video that he sent over this morning.
Okay.
So take a look at this, and then we'll be back with you.
Shalom from Israel. I'm Lars Enarsson with the Watchman International, coming to you from the border of Gaza. It is today, Wednesday, August the 13th, and I'm standing here by the border. It's a hazy morning, but what you see in the background is the border to Gaza. Tonight, midnight, the 72-hour ceasefire agreement will expire. And the question is, will there be an extension? Will there be an agreement? Or will there be a renewed fighting here? The Lord woke me up at 3 a.m. this morning, and I believe I have a word from the Lord that we are to pray that Israel will not agree to any concessions to Hamas in Cairo, but that we should pray that Israel rather will get back into Gaza in order to topple Hamas. And I ask all of you to continue to pray for that. I want to thank you for standing with us here in prayer. Thank you, all of you who are praying with us right now. It is a very, very crucial moment in the Middle East where everyone is asking what is going to happen next. And as I said, let's pray that Israel will not agree to the concessions that Hamas is asking for in Cairo, but in order to deliver Gaza from the tyranny of Hamas, we need to pray that Israel will launch a new operation into Gaza. The overall objective of our prayer should be the highway of revival, as I call it, mentioned in Isaiah chapter 19, that will go from Egypt to Assyria. Assyria is today Iraq, and this is the area right now where Islamic fundamentalism is having a heyday through ISIS in Iraq and Hamas here in Gaza. In fact, ISIS are also fighting here with Hamas in Gaza. So we need to pray that this area instead will become liberated now from the tyranny of Islamic fundamentalism, and that the gospel will begin to go into these areas, beginning in Gaza. In fact, we should pray for free zones in Gaza that Israel will establish, where they can provide the needs of the people, the Arabs in Gaza, and also allow the gospel to begin to be preached. I realize that Isaiah 19 has a future final fulfillment, but it is a pattern that we are to pray for right now. It is very crucial that we get into this battle in prayer, friends. So join us in that. Secondly, the UN has now appointed a law professor, a Canadian law professor. His name is William Shabazz, to head the inquiry that will prosecute Israel for war crimes in Gaza. I am praying and asking all of you to pray that instead somebody, either the government of Israel or somebody else, will instead prosecute the UN for war crimes in Gaza. There are ample evidence that the UN facilities here, both schools and health clinics, have been weapons depots for Hamas. And especially in schools, this is a war crime. And somebody should turn the table against Hamas or against the UN and instead take them to the International Criminal Court in Hague for war crimes here in Gaza. The Canadian Foreign Minister, we applaud him. He immediately objected to the choice of law professor William Shabazz to head the UN inquiry, saying because he is biased against Israel. And Israel is refusing to cooperate with this UN inquiry, which is good. However, we should turn the table against the UN by somebody taking them to court for war crimes here in Gaza. One of the examples that came out recently was a soldier who said that his unit went into a UN health clinic and discovered a tunnel that Hamas had built in the UN clinic. And when they went in there to destroy it, 80 kilograms of explosives blew up, killed 3 of the soldiers and wounded the rest that went into a UN booby-trap building in Gaza. Well, that is certainly a reason for prosecution for war crimes for the UN here. I am Lars Enarsson from the Border to Gaza. I ask you, please go to our website, thewatchman.org, and subscribe to the prayer alerts. That way you will get the specific prayer points that we are agreeing on. Thank you for praying with us. I'm Lars Enarsson with the Watchman International from Israel on the border to Gaza. Shalom.
Lars is doing such a great job with
Yes.
these videos that he
Yes.
sends us. And this really leads us to our first news report that we have. This comes to us from Israel National News. Hamas terrorists broke the truce with Israel on Wednesday, more than 2 hours before it was scheduled to end at midnight. Sirens sounded in southern Israel after 9 p.m., and at least one rocket that was fired from Gaza exploded harmlessly in the Hof Eshkelon area. Thousands of IDF reservists were deployed to the Gaza front on Wednesday, reported Israel Hayom, which said that the deployment is in preparation for a possible resumption of hostilities. In addition, reported the Daily, hundreds of other reservists were told to prepare for possible deployment later tonight. Arab sources gave contradictory reports on progress at the Cairo ceasefire talks, in which Israel and Hamas are negotiating indirectly through Egyptian mediators. The Israeli delegation to the talks flew home Wednesday evening. The Palestinian team is scheduled to hold a press conference at 9:30 p.m. Israel time. Some Palestinian and Egyptian sources said Hamas had toughened its positions, apparently on the instructions of its kingpin, Khaled Mesha'al. Israeli sources said that the talks are stuck and estimated that Israel is preparing for a resumption of fighting. Meanwhile, other reports, including a statement by a Hamas official in Gaza, said that the sides were close to finalizing a deal.
Yeah. So things are probably going to heat back up over there. And right now we're going to move over to Iraq. This article comes to us from Fox News and the Associated Press. Iraq's embattled prime minister is on the ropes as rival Baghdad leaders move to replace him, and the U.S. nudged him to step aside and let someone else deal with the Sunni insurgency engulfing the nation. Iraq's new president snubbed incumbent Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki by nominating the Deputy Parliament Speaker to form a new government Monday in a move aimed at unifying the country against the growing threat of radical Sunni militants in the north. After members of the Iraqi National Group nominated Haider al-Abadi as its candidate, newly elected Iraqi President Fawad Massoum then charged al-Abadi with forming a new government in the next 30 days. The president's choice is a public rejection of al-Maliki, who in an angry midnight speech all but demanded he be renominated for a third term. Al-Maliki's Shiite-dominated bloc won the most parliament seats in April elections, and the prime minister sees himself as the rightful candidate. Critics say that Shiite al-Maliki contributed to the crisis by monopolizing power and pursuing a sectarian agenda that alienated the country's Sunni and Kurdish minorities. Meanwhile, al-Maliki has deployed his elite security forces in the streets of Baghdad, partially closed two main streets, popular spots for pro- and anti-government rallies, as hundreds of his supporters took to the streets. Senior U.S. officials said the Obama administration has begun directly providing weapons to Peshmerga forces, which have started to make gains against the al-Qaeda breakaway group, IS. On Monday, with the help of American airstrikes, Iraq's government forces battled Sunni militants in the country's north and west. U.S. warplanes carried out new strikes, hitting a militant convoy moving to attack Kurdish forces defending the autonomous zone's capital, Erbil. American strikes in recent days helped bring one of the Kurds' first victories after weeks of retreat, as Kurdish Peshmerga fighters recaptured two towns near Erbil over the weekend. At around the same time as al-Maliki's speech Sunday evening, the Wall Street Journal reported that security forces had deployed in unusually large numbers across Baghdad. The soldiers were particularly prominent in the so-called Green Zone, which includes the Prime Minister's home, as well as the Parliament building, crucial government offices, and many embassies. The political infighting could hamper efforts to stem advances by the militant group known as Islamic State, which has seized a large swath of northern and western Iraq in recent weeks.
And this next report comes to us from the AP. Islamic militants have crushed a tribal uprising against their rule in eastern Syria after 3 days of clashes in a string of villages near the border with Iraq, killing and beheading opponents along the way. Activists said this on Monday. Well, the armed revolt by the Shu'atat tribe in the eastern province of Deir el-Zur was the first sign of local resistance by tribesmen to the Islamic State group since its fighters swept into the province. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Monday that Islamic State, IS, group fighters regained control of 3 villages from the Shu'atat tribe after being expelled earlier this month. The Islamic State fighters beheaded 2 tribesmen after they fled to a nearby village. The civil war in Syria, now in its 4th year, has continued to bleed while attention has shifted to conflicts in Gaza and Iraq. Fighters from the al-Qaeda breakaway group Islamic State control huge swaths of territory in eastern and northern Syria. IS, which consists mainly of foreign fighters, has taken over much of northern and eastern Syria, as well as western and northern Iraq. In their bid to gain more territory, the IS group is fighting the Syrian army, Kurdish militias, and even other rebel groups who have been trying to overthrow Syrian President Bashar Assad since 2011. IS has declared a self-styled caliphate in the territory it controls along the Iraqi-Syrian border, imposing a harsh interpretation of Islamic law.
The clashes in eastern Syria came as Islamic State fighters tightened their siege of a major military air base in the Syrian town of Tabqa in the northern province of Raqqa, which is now an Islamic State stronghold. The air base is the last army position in the Raqqa province, and according to the observatory's chief, the Islamic State group is bombarding the base with artillery and appears to be preparing to storm it. Last week, IS fighters seized the nearby Brigade 93 base after days of heavy fighting. Late last month, they captured another base in which they took dozens of prisoners, some of whom were later beheaded and their bodies paraded in one of Raqqa's main squares. The conflict in Syria, which has clear sectarian overtones between Sunni and Shiite Muslims, began in March 2011. Activists say that over 170,000 people have been killed in Syria during the 3 years of fighting. In neighboring Lebanon, the former Prime Minister, Saad Hariri, announced he was personally donating $15 million for the reconstruction of a Lebanese border town that was overrun last week by IS extremists who were based in Syria. The Sunni IS militants withdrew from Arsal on Thursday after fierce clashes with the Lebanese army that went on for 5 days. Hariri, considered Lebanon's most influential Sunni Muslim politician, returned Friday after 3 years of self-imposed exile. His surprise return home was seen as a bid to reassert his leadership over Sunnis in Lebanon amid growing concern that many in the community are being radicalized by the increasingly sectarian war next door in Syria.
Well, this comes to us from INN, AP, JPost.com, and Reuters. An Italian Associated Press video journalist, the freelance Palestinian translator working with him, 3 Palestinian bomb disposal experts, and 1 other Gazan were killed on Wednesday when an unexploded munitions blew up, medical officials and police said. According to Hamas Interior Ministry spokesperson Ayad al-Buzam, the explosion occurred when a number of explosives experts were dismantling a missile in Beit Lahia, a town in the northern Gaza Strip that had been the scene of fierce fighting between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants during a month-long conflict. Well, a 72-hour ceasefire went into effect on Sunday at midnight. According to an AFP correspondent in Gaza, the Italian journalist Simone Camilli and his assistant were reporting on the dismantling from the scene. 4 people, including AP photographer Hatem Musa, were badly injured. Musa told a colleague that they were filming the scene when an initial explosion went off. He said he was hit by shrapnel and began to run away when a second blast knocked him unconscious.
Camilli, 35, is the first foreign journalist killed in the Gaza conflict. He'd worked for the Associated Press since 2005. Najib Jobain, the AP's chief producer in Gaza, said Camilli was a welcome face in Gaza who loved the story so much that he recently turned down an assignment in Iraq to come to the seaside strip. Camilli's assistant was a 36-year-old Gaza resident who often worked with international media as a translator and news assistant. He leaves behind a wife and 2 daughters. Casualties among those not involved in the actual dismantling could have been avoided by distancing the public from the missile. The incident lends further evidence to Hamas's disregard for human life. Use of civilians as human shields by Hamas was already well documented when a news report broke on Monday, which exposed the abuse of foreign journalists working in Gaza who failed to report favorably on Hamas. Illustrating the danger Hamas places foreign journalists in, an Indian TV crew last week captured footage of Hamas planting a rocket launch pad adjacent to their hotel in the middle of what is a residential area full of hotels and apartment buildings. The rockets were launched at Israel in a clear strategy to tempt the IDF to conduct an airstrike response to take out the launcher and in the process kill civilians, including foreign journalists, so as to inflate casualty figures and bring further condemnation on the IDF. And that came from the reports from the journalists who say we are now safely out of Gaza and we can tell you what is actually going on
because
over there.
Because they can't do that while they're there. Their lives will be threatened.
Yes.
Okay, this comes to us from the AP, an Israeli military tactic that allows overwhelming fire to stop the capture of soldiers is facing criticism after its use in the Gaza conflict. The Hannibal procedure was designed in the mid-1980s after Hezbollah guerrillas captured 2 soldiers in southern Lebanon. The prevention of Israeli troops being abducted is paramount, in part because past cases have ended in painful, lopsided prisoner exchanges after years of protracted negotiations. Colonel Yaakov Midror said the order was designed to give young soldiers on the ground clear guidelines for such a situation. He said, "The order is that you cannot kill the soldier, but you can endanger him. A soldier in that situation knows he's in danger anyway." Well, the alleged application of the Hannibal procedure during Operation Protective Edge has angered critics who say it may have led to the deaths of scores of Palestinians on August 1st, when shortly after an internationally brokered ceasefire took effect, Hamas terrorists emerged from a tunnel and opened fire on Israeli troops near Rafah along Gaza's southern border with Egypt. 3 bodies were found at the scene shortly after the Hamas ambush, But upon closer inspection, Israeli troops realized that one of the bodies was actually a Hamas militant disguised in an Israeli uniform, which immediately raised fears that Hamas militants had captured Lieutenant Hadar Golden. Well, the IDF unleashed a massive barrage of airstrikes and artillery fire aimed at blocking any potential escape routes of the kidnappers. Defying protocol, a fellow officer rushed into one of the tunnels and found some personal effects belonging to Golden that later helped the military rule Golden deceased. The heavy shelling leveled the area in Rafah, killing some 100 Palestinians, Palestinian health officials said. However, they could not offer a breakdown of the number of civilians and Hamas militants killed. The military would not officially confirm whether Hannibal was enacted after Golden's disappearance. The Association for Civil Rights in Israel, a prominent rights group, asked the government this week to strike down the doctrine and investigate its use. Islamic militant groups have put a premium on capturing soldiers. And when they have succeeded, they have not extended international prisoner of war rights, preventing visits from the Red Cross and keeping word of their captive status secret. Gilad Shalit's captivity, which lasted more than 5 years, is a prime example of this. He was abducted when Hamas militants emerged from a tunnel and attacked his tank in 2006, killing 2 other IDF soldiers.
Now, this article I find really interesting because it actually shows that those tunnels are pretty well stocked. And it comes to us from the International Business Times. 23 militants from Hamas's military wing were rescued from a tunnel dug into Israel after being trapped for 2 weeks following an Israeli Defense Force airstrike. Qassam Brigade said in a statement, the 23 fighters had survived almost certain death when a tunnel collapsed at the beginning of the Israeli ground assault. The statement confirmed that the militants were in the tunnel preparing for an attack against IDF troops when the attack occurred. A trapped Hamas commander said that the fighters were discovered during a 3-day ceasefire between Israel and the group. So it's just happened during this ceasefire. A rescued Hamas militant, quoted by the Anadolu agency, said, "We lost contact with our colleagues. Rescue teams dug the area to extract the Mujahideen, the fighters, and they were surprised to find us alive. The discovery comes as Israel removes all of its ground troops from the territory. Wait, they're going back in now, and both parties hold indirect talks in Cairo regarding a lasting ceasefire agreement. Israel has offered to extend the current 3-day ceasefire, while Hamas says that it will not accept an extension unless the Israeli blockade is lifted."
Of course, though, not much has changed.
Well, if it's such a really great blockade, where in the heck are they getting all the rockets and missiles and stuff that they're using against Israel?
They're not building these themselves.
Some they are building there, but even the goods to manufacture them have to be taken in. You know, it's very much to me like what President Bashar al-Assad in Syria has had to deal with. Oh, these poor little rebel fighters. It's like, I'm sorry, this has now been going on more than 3.5 years that he's been fighting them. And I also found it very interesting, and Lars mentioned this, that the Islamic State, the one that has declared the caliphate, not only are they taking on Bashar al-Assad, they're taking on the other rebels that are fighting Bashar al-Assad. They're taking on the Kurds. They're taking on the Iraqi army. And guess what? They're in Gaza too. So these guys are everywhere right now.
And they're well funded.
Very well funded. And we're sitting here trying to decide if we need to take them out in Iraq. It's like, really? Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe we got to let them spread.
Okay, well, this comes to us from Israel National News. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the military wing of Palestinian Authority, Chairman Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah Party, has threatened to carry out terrorist acts against Israel, including the kidnapping of IDF soldiers. Now, in a newly released video filmed in Gaza, members of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades are seen in a warehouse where weapons and dozens of rockets are stored. Wearing a mask, one of the activists tells the camera that the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade supports the demands of the Palestinian delegation for talks on a ceasefire with Israel, adding that Israel must accept all demands. He further stresses the organization's determination to carry out quality attacks against Israel, including the kidnapping of soldiers in order to free all the prisoners who are serving time in Israeli prisons. While
prisoners that are serving time in Israeli prisons because they have acted as terrorists against Israeli civilians.
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to read this without just laughing. I mean, this is crazy, but let's continue. While Mahmoud Abbas, who heads the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, has often been touted as a peace partner, his Fatah party's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade's military wing claimed a shooting attack on a group of Zionists near Bethlehem on Sunday. It also claimed responsibility for a failed shooting attack last Sunday in Samaria. Fatah has called for the ethnic cleansing of Jews from Israel and declared open war on Israel late last month, so not much has changed. On Monday, Palestinian Media Watch released a translated statement from Fatah in which the movement boasted of having murdered, get this, 11,000 Israelis.
I know. I hope all of you tuned into Fox News is Sean Hannity last week, because he was in Israel and he did a great job interviewing and showing people what's really, really going on.
And you said he was in the tunnels, is that right? Did I hear you
yes,
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
in one program, yes. The IDF took him down into one of those tunnels, which it was amazing how well built it was. It's not just like some little dirt tunnel. It's concrete enforced. It's amazing. And here's some good news from Israel National News. According to a senior IDF officer, the military is about to carry out comprehensive field tests of technological means for locating tunnels. The technology has already been successfully tested in laboratory conditions. If the experiment is successful, the systems will be deployed around Gaza at a cost of $1 billion to $1.5 billion shekels. The senior officer said that the IDF had received about 700 offers for anti-tunnel systems and chose 2. A video released July 17th by the IDF showing 13 terrorists emerging from a tunnel near Sufa sent shockwaves through the Israeli public, which had never seen such a chilling sight or even imagined it possible. The video of the incident was a major factor in prodding the government to decide on a ground offensive into Gaza and guaranteed support from the public and media. Well, you would think. Various media reports over the years have described possible solutions as including sensors that would detect tunnels as they were being dug, massive trench digging contraptions that could create a deep protective trench around Gaza, and robots that could dig their way into tunnels and blow them up. The senior IDF officer also spoke about the Iron Dome system and confirmed that the system worked well during Operation Protective Edge. However, he warned, we can't rest on our laurels. In the next campaign, the terrorists will try to improve the range of the missiles, the altitude of their trajectory, and the amount of missiles launched each time. Therefore, the system must constantly update itself, and we're operating accordingly. The Trophy defense system, which protects armored vehicles from anti-tank missiles, also worked efficiently in the war, the officer said. Another 3 billion shekels are required to provide protection for all of the vehicles. Money was never the issue, he stressed, only providing the proper means for protection. I think that's just great news. I wonder what it's going to be. You know, it's going to be very ingenious and very cool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was reading a little bit on some of their options of what they're looking at. It's really high-tech, cool stuff.
Oh, it's kind of like the Iron Dome. That it couldn't be more high-tech than it is to be able to shoot rockets and missiles out of the air.
One of them was a sensor that goes underground, and so they can check if somebody's digging. I mean, it'll be cool from a technological point of view.
Well, we thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. And tonight, enjoy a repeat of Holocaust survivor Zoli Zamir.